Okay, so today's live stream is in response to a comment which I received on this video, which was called Challenge and Response. I was reading from, and am reading from, okay. Due warning here, this is a live stream and it's behind the scenes, so I'm intending to okay, this is not working. I'm going to go offline for a moment because I have a okay. All right, this is a live stream. This is behind the scenes live stream. So today I'm calling in to, let's see, greetings from Trinidad, Tobago. Thank you for joining me. The other day I was asked a question about the signs of breakdown of society, as discussed by Arnold Toynbee. And I'm reading today from this book, which is Carl Jung and Arnold Toynbee, The Social Meaning of Inner Work. And this is published by Inner City Books. The book is by Jungian analyst J. Gary Sparks. And Dr. Sparks has very interestingly put a comparison between Jungian psychology and Arnold Toynbee's lifelong work. So this is a behind the scenes video. It's going to have mistakes in it because I have not edited it in any way as yet, but this is material that's so important. I think it's useful for me to talk about it and to read this section from this book, make this video available to everyone, and then later on I will go back and edit the video and what is presented. So you're in the behind the scenes segment, so I'm sorry if anything doesn't sound just right. I may repeat myself a few times because I sometimes trip over my own tongue when I'm reading. And as you hear, I often say the words and so. So I apologize for that as well. Okay, so the question is, what causes the breakdown of society? And so I'm on page 74 of this book, Carl Jung so I'm at page 74 of this book, Carl Jung and Arnold Toynbee, The Social Meaning of Inner Work, by J. Gary Sparks, published by Inner City Books. And here first, Dr. Sparks is giving us a definition of mimesis. And so let me read that. So it's a subheading, mimesis. So, under the best circumstances, the individual presses forward and presents the fruit of his or her inner journey to public view, perhaps by writing, talking, art, music, or whatever medium suits the talents of this individual. Now, this YouTube channel would be an example of that because this is my creative work. Reading on. Then what? Here Toynbee introduces the term mimesis, a concept crucial to his opus. Mimesis means imitation on the social level. It shares the same root as the words mime and mimic. Mime, it shares the same root with It shares the same root as the words mime and mimic. Quote, social imitation, or mimesis, may be defined as the acquisition through imitation of social assets, aptitudes or emotions or ideas, which the acquisitors have not originated for themselves, and which they might never have come to possess if they had not encountered and imitated other people in whose possession these assets were already to be found. Mimesis, too, is a generic feature of social life. Unquote. Mimesis is imitation, but not imitation merely of one single person by another single person. It is the imitation by a group of another person or group. Mimesis inspires voluntary allegiance. In Toynbee's view, when a society is healthy, mimesis is inspired by creative personalities of the time through their charisma, by the spell they cast. If we reconsider Toynbee's position from the point of view of our analytic work, which seeks to find our creative voice, articulating what we have learned about ourselves and ourselves as instances of a society's psychology, that small creative voice asks for expression in the body politic as we return to social life. In any case, to the extent that the creative voices are heard, and to the extent that the populace heeds and follows, the society can grow. The discovery of our individual creativity in the analytic process is an essential ingredient in that growth. The discovery of our individual creativity in the analytic process is an essential ingredient in that growth. It is a double-edged sword, however. That tendency to form an allegiance can easily go astray. Toynbee writes about how mimesis can go wrong, and when it goes wrong, the society fails. It fails because people no longer know what the creative voices sound like, and because they no longer follow the healthy voices of their time. Mimesis, a living process, far too easily becomes mimicry. What keeps mimesis in the service of growth and not mere mimicry is strenuous intellectual communion and intimate personal intercourse. Mimesis involves dialogue and reflection within the human community. Mimicry does not. It is blind, thoughtless, and without reflection. Having discussed mimesis as part of the nexus surrounding the social effectiveness of challenge and response, Toynbee is equally diligent in examining the failure of mimesis. Two conditions spell disaster. The leaders can lose their creativity, or the leaders can be creative and nobody listens. Sadly, I feel the latter is far too typical of our time. Toynbee is talking about dynamics at the social level, though we can see a for instance close to home. Okay, now I'm going to skip through parts of this because I want to just give the essence of what Dr. Sparks is saying, and I would urge you to purchase this book, Carl Jung and Arnold Toynbee, The Social Meaning of Inner Work by J. Gary Sparks, published by Inner City Books. There's a link to Inner City Books and to the purchase of this book in the description of this video. Now, as is my custom in these behind-the-scenes sessions, I will stop every 5 to 10 minutes at convenient times to me and be happy to answer any question that you may have about Dr. Jung's work. Of course, this evening at 8 p.m. we will have our regular weekly meeting of the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. Okay, the next section I'm going to read from is Decline in Creative Power. The creative power, its move from inside to outside, and its connection to the populace through individuals is always Toynbee's litmus test for the health of a society. He continues to examine in further detail then why civilizations lose their creative power. A study of history, this is Toynbee's book called A Study of History. It's a 12-volume set of books, actually, so just beware. But anyway, a study of history next concentrates on the process of disintegration, both in the society and within the individual living in. Toynbee's horizons shift to the structure of society as it begins to fall apart. What does disintegration look like in a society, and what does it look like in the psychological interiority of the individuals living in a... That's a mouthful. I'm going to start again with that sentence. What does disintegration look like in a society, and what does it look like in the psychological interiority of the individuals living in a collapsing civilization? These questions become his focus. Toynbee contends that when a civilization is growing, the creative voice counts. When a civilization is not growing, the creative voice does not count. I would just point out as an aside here that we've been pushing creative activities out of elementary and high schools for the last 50 years. So it's very hard to find an art program or creative writing program or a music program in many public schools in the United States, and this is an issue. Carrying on with this paragraph, which appears on page 77. This is evidenced in the examples I just cited from my own experience instancing the more general trend of our recurrently opaque society. When the civilization is growing or struggling to grow, we are challenged to link up our inner process with outer issues. From a thorough inner journey and an understanding of our own psyche, we share what we've learned with other voices intent on contributing to the We share what we've learned with other voices intent on contributing to the solution of society's problems. When a society is not growing, however, we have to protect ourselves against the disintegrating influences of the time. The possibility of creatively contributing to the health of society is closed off. The option left for thoughtful individuals is the attempt to examine the values of the society and participate in their creative re-evaluation. then Dr. Then Dr. Spark, then Dr. Sparks is speaking about the breakdown of mimesis. In a healthy or struggling society, mimesis works or is seeking to work. In the period of a society's decline, mimesis does not work. Skipping ahead, Toynbee looks at the lack of creative power in the individual and the failure of the society to respond to it, even if the creative power were there. In the long run, though, Toynbee settles on the rigidity of the society preventing the creative individual from making his or her contribution. Think of a fascist state such as North Korea. What good would any amount of creative input lead to in such a totalitarian regime? Wherever we place our emphasis, whether on the creative personality or on the rigid society, in the loss of social unity, Toynbee states that something has gone wrong with that interaction between individuals through which the growth of every growing civilization is achieved. Since the creative individuals cannot carry their fellow human beings with them, the society is left with a collection of mechanized human beings. When mimesis breaks down, connections within the society break down. Mechanical mimicry and standardization replace the strenuous effort to consciously understand and follow well-articulated paths to health. Mimesis can be perilous as well. Jung agrees. Quote, human beings have one faculty which, though it is of the greatest utility for collective purposes, is most pernicious for individuation, and that is the faculty of imitation. Collective psychology cannot dispense with imitation, for without it, all mass organizations, the state, and the social order are impossible. Society is organized, indeed, less by law than by the propensity to imitation, implying equally suggestibility, suggestion, and mental contagion. This is the dual edge of mimesis. But we see every day how people use, or rather abuse, the mechanism of imitation for the purpose of personal differentiation. They are content to ape some eminent personality, some striking characteristic or mode of behavior, thereby achieving an outward distinction from the circle in which they move. We could almost say that as a punishment for this, the uniformity of their minds with those of their neighbors, already real enough, is intensified into an unconscious, compulsive bondage to the environment. As a rule, these specious attempts at differentiation stiffen into a pose. As a rule, these specious attempts at differentiation stiffen into a pose, and the imitator remains at the same level as he always was, only several degrees more sterile than before. Okay, and then I'm going to skip ahead again. Okay, apologies to Dr. Sparks for the portions of this that I'm going to leave out. He knows why I'm leaving them out, and for those of you who don't know why, please buy this book, Carl Jung and Arnold Toynbee, The Social Meaning of Inner Work by J. Gary Sparks, published by Inner City Books. causes of breakdown. Though Toynbee is not a fan of causal thinking, he does attempt to delineate some causes leading to the failure of mimesis. 1. The populace becomes hypnotized by a sterile leader, and thus their initiative is undermined. 2. Creative leaders grow weary. 3. Creative leaders abandon, in his words, the music of Orpheus for the whip of power. I would restate that in a simpler form. Creative leaders abandon creativity for the whip of power. They give up the work of inspiring and begin seeking to achieve their goals with power, just like our old friend Siegfried. That's a reference to a hero in German mythology who's referred to in the Red Book. 4. A favorite of mine is the tendency to put new wine in old bottles. I'm going to skip ahead here. 5. Creative persons form esoteric little groups. So I would go back and make an observation. So in number 4, Dr. Sparks says, a favorite of mine is the tendency to put new wine in old bottles. An example might be in our current political situation when the GOP and the Democratic Party are trying to stuff us back into the bottles that they had us in during the 20th century instead of renewing themselves. That's obvious in our politics today. 5. Creative persons form esoteric little groups. 6. There is a seductive tendency for creative persons to rest on their oars. After the strenuous work of creation, the temptation to surrender to inertia looms large, tranquilizing the once creative instinct that still may have much to offer. 7. Under the term idolatry, Toynbee most closely examines the last factor in a list of causes of the failure of mimesis. The characteristic of idolatry is the practice of confusing long-term and short-term goals. He distinguishes between idolization of the self, in other words, inflation, narcissism in pop psychology. In other words, inflation, narcissism in pop psychology. Idolization of an ephemeral institution, for example, sports, military campaigns, corporations. And idolization of technology, for example, smartphones. He calls this destructive idealization. Idolization is the pop psych word for what we. Idolization is the pop psychology word for what he mentions as inward psychological aberration and the most potent cause of breakdown of any. All of these aberrations take us away from the ability to respond creatively to challenges from the inside out, put to us by our inner work and our social living. Jungians see all these daily in our analytical practice. Robert, thank you for joining me. I've seen some of your videos as well, and I was impressed by those. Okay, reading on. Of course, the point of Toynbee's discussion is to avert the nemesis of creativity, and the destruction of the process whereby creativity emerges in single individuals to be communicated to a wider public. I think I better read this again because this sentence, the point about this sentence is that the nemesis of creativity is a destruction of the process of creativity. But I'm going to read it again because I had trouble following it myself when I read it the first time. Of course, the point of Toynbee's discussion is to avert the nemesis of creativity and the destruction of the process whereby creativity emerges in single individuals to be communicated to a wider public. It is consciousness that makes a difference between growth or disintegration, he argues. If the society locates these 7 destructive tendencies within itself, it can follow the creative point of view and is not doomed to failure. Naturally, these aberrations are all behavioral phenomena we see in ourselves and in the consulting room. Hence, it is worth remembering them, particularly in the analytic process. Again, psychology converges on societal dynamics and can make a difference in the lives of individuals who may yet contribute to the health of their community. Failing this, societies disintegrate. The failure of a society is the failure of a society is rooted in the fatal psychological mistakes of its members. Toynbee stresses that always, when we look at the decline of a given society and find an outer cause, economics, war, geography, or whatever, the outer cause could only have an effect where the society is already weakened by its own foolishness. Suicide, so to speak, not murder, Suicide, so to speak, not murder, is what brings a society to its knees. That was a discussion of the causes of decline. To sum up, Toynbee locates societal decline in the demise of mimesis. In other words, in the disruption of the series of events by which societies retain their health, namely through the challenge and response of individuals and their mimetic capacities. Now, there's one very, very interesting footnote here. Let's see. I'm sorry the video is laggy. It's not appearing to be so on my end, so I suppose once it's in a I'll just have to see. Once it's available for playback, it may be okay. Otherwise, I may have to change some of the settings here because it may have to do with the busyness of the internet. Good morning, Miles. How are you? Good to see you. Hello, Thomas. Once came up with a somewhat cutesy name for the nemesis of creativity, the anti-muse, that which diminishes our ability to be original. Yeah, I think that's a very good one, actually. Okay, so there's one footnote here that's really frightening, and it has to do with cell phones. And so I think I better read this footnote, and it has to do with the section where Dr. Sparks was talking about idolization and the idolization of idolization or idealization of technology. So here's the footnote. A faculty member at a local university told me a disconcerting story. For 35 years, she asked her upper-class undergraduate students to form pairs in order to complete a class project and its presentation. At the beginning of each semester, she invited them to take a longer class break than usual and to find a partner, then return after the pause to inform her who was working with whom. For the first time ever, she told me, the students were unable to talk with each other at the break, submerged as they were in their smartphones. She had to send them back out. She had to send them back out into the hall 2 more times before they were actually able to talk with each other. Okay, that's from a essay called Strenuous Intellectual Communion and Intimate Personal Intercourse. And so it seems our young people, in fact, all of us, are losing our ability to communicate with one another. So that, anyway, yeah, that's a sad story. Surely is. All right. So I'm not going to read all of this. This reading has been from Carl Jung and Arnold Toynbee, The Social Meaning of Inner Work, and it's by Jungian analyst J. Gary Sparks, and it's published by Inner City Books. I hope you'll all buy a copy and read it in total. C.J. Law says, afternoon, gentlemen. 15:34 here in the UK. Hi, CJ. Great to have you. This has been a behind-the-scenes reading, which is now essentially complete. I am prepared to comment on any questions anyone might have on Jungian psychology. Otherwise, I'm going to terminate this particular broadcast until 8 o'clock tonight, when our regular meeting group, when our regular Carl Jung Depth Psychology reading group is online. Thomas Dennis says, the girls would probably protest, but we were communicating with others on our cell phones, unaware that they were doing the opposite of be here now. Okay. Howard says, I have a long comment, but I have to send it in chunks. Howard, okay, but we can also think about having you send it as comments to this video once it's available on playback. I'm not sure the chat will be available on playback. I'm not sure the chat will be available on playback, so you might want to put your long comment in the commentary. I'll set I will set the playback for public immediately. It will take YouTube a few minutes to crunch the video so that they can make it public. But I will, I think I'm going to log off now and let you go ahead and do that. You can prepare your comment offline and then upload it to the comment section as soon as this becomes available on playback. I'm sorry, but this is the way behind the scenes goes, and I have a couple of other things I have to do today. So I'm going to terminate now, and I will see you this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time if you're in the United States, and if you're CJ, that will be on replay for you tomorrow, and I'll see you tomorrow in the advanced reading group. Take care now. Bye.